Children, today we are going to study a play from Snapshot Supplementary Reader of Class 11 in English. So today the name of the chapter which we are going to study is Mother's Day by CHRISTIE. Children, do you love your mother? How much you love your mother? Did you ever say thank you to your mother for everything she has done for you? Did you ever say I love you to your mother? So if not, you might have loved your mother but had never expressed your emotion or feelings to your mother by saying thank you or by saying I love you to your mother. So this is the right time. If you had never tell your mother thank you and I love you, I care for you, I understand you, these kinds of words you can tell it today itself, so that you can give at least a small gift to your mother that your mother really deserves. In every family, the mother plays a very important role, and the mother is the one who will do everything for her husband, for her son, for her daughter, but never take care of herself. She will sacrifice her desire just because of the family. So there are many different kind of mother in this world. Maximum mother who are, especially the housewife mother, they are never recognized by the husband or by their children. So this story, written by CHRISTIE, it is a drama. With the help of this story, we will came to know the importance of a mother, the role of a mother in a family. So let's begin this play. The following play is a humorous portrayal of the status of the mother in the family. Let's read on to how Mrs. Pearson's family reacts when she tries to stand up for her own rights. Yes, this is a very interesting chapter which we are going to study now. There are the major character in this particular play. The number one is Mrs. Annie Pearson. Mrs. Annie Pearson is the protagonist of this particular play, and she is the mother of Doris and Cyril. So Mr. George Pearson is the husband of Annie Pearson, and Miss Doris Pearson is the daughter. Mr. Cyril Pearson is the son, and Mrs. Fitzgerald is the fortune teller as well as the neighbor of this family. So the action takes place in the living room of Mrs. Pearson's house in London suburb. So this is the present time. The scene, the living room of the Pearson family. Afternoon, it is comfortably furnished, much lived-in room in a small suburb, urban semi-detached villa. If necessary, only one door need to be used, but it is better with two, one up left leading to the front door and the stairs, and the other in the right wall leading to the kitchen and the back door. There can be a muslin covered window in the left wall and possibly one in the right wall. The fireplace is assumed to be in the fourth wall. There is a settee up right, an armchair down left and one down right, a small table with two chairs on either side of it stands at the center. So this is the setup of the stage, how the stage is set up. When the curtain rises, it is an afternoon in early autumn and the stage can be well lit. Mrs. Pearson at right and Mrs. Fitzgerald at left. Remember, Mrs. Pearson is the protagonist of this play. Mrs. Fitzgerald is a fortune teller and the neighbor of Mrs. Pearson. So Mrs. Pearson is at the right and Mrs. Fitzgerald at the left are sitting opposite each other at a small table on which there are 2 teacups and saucer and cards with which Mrs. Fitzgerald has been telling Mrs. Pearson's fortune. Mrs. Pearson is a pleasant but worried looking woman in her 40s. Mrs. Fitzgerald is older, heavier and a strong and sinister personality. She is smoking. It is very important that these two should have sharply contrasting voices. Mrs. Pearson speaking in a light, flurried sort of tone, with a touch of suburban cockney perhaps, and Mrs. Fitzgerald with a deep voice, rather Irish perhaps. So in this particular description, this is a narration and it is about the personality and the setup of the stage. The personality of Mrs. Fitzgerald, as it is mentioned that she is a very worried looking woman in her 40s. While compared to Mrs. Fitzgerald is older than Mrs. Pearson but heavier and a strong sinister personality. But she is having that sinister personality. If we looked at her, she is very bold. She is very bold enough while compared to Mrs. Pearson. Now the dialogues between Mrs. Pearson and Mrs. Fitzgerald. Now Mrs. Fitzgerald is saying to Mrs. Pearson while collecting up the cards. She says, "And that's all I can tell you. Mrs. Pearson, could be a good fortune, could be a bad one. All depends on yourself now. Make up your mind." And there it is. Mrs. Pearson is replying, "Yes, thank you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. I'm much obliged, I'm sure. It's wonderful having a real fortune teller living next door. Did you learn out east too?" So, with this conversation we came to know that Mrs. Fitzgerald, with the help of her fortune cards, she says that Mrs. Pearson is having a good fortune as well as bad also. It is upon her whether to make it good or make it bad. So Mrs. Pearson is continuing her saying, "I did 12 years ahead of it, my old man rising to be lieutenant quartermaster. He learned a lot and I learned a lot more. But will you make up my mind now? Mrs. Pearson dear, put your foot down once for all and be the mistress of your own house and the boss of your own family." With this conversation we came to know that Mrs. Pearson was really disturbed with her own family and she was not happy with her own family. Mrs. Pearson smiling, "That's easier said than done. Besides, I'm so fond of them, even if they are so thoughtless and selfish. They don't mean to be." So here how Mrs. Pearson replied to Mrs. Fitzgerald that her family was so thoughtless and selfish. So these two terms she had mentioned for her own family, that they were thoughtless and selfish. Okay, Mrs. Fitzgerald cutting in, "May not be, but it would be better for them if they learn to treat you properly." Okay, maybe they are thoughtless and selfish, but it is you who has to be very bold enough to treat them properly. Okay, so Mrs. Pearson replied, "Yes, I suppose it would, in a way." Mrs. Fitzgerald is saying now, "No doubt about it at all. Who's the better for being spoiled? Grown man lad or girl? Nobody. You think it does them good when you run after them all the time, take their orders as if you were the servant in the house, stay at home every night while they go out enjoying themselves. Never in all your life. It's the ruin of them as well as you. Husband, sons, daughters should be taking notice of wife as mother, not giving them orders and treating them like dirt. And don't tell me you don't know what I mean, for I know more than you have told me. Mrs. Pearson is replying, I keep dropping a hint. Mrs. Fitzgerald, hint? It's more than hints your family need, Mrs. Pearson. So, with the help of this conversation, we came to know that really there is a need of change in the life of Mrs. Pearson because she was not treated well in her own family. Okay, so Mrs. Pearson is telling, I suppose it is, but I do hate any unpleasantness and it's so hard to know where to start. I keep making up my mind to have it out with them, but somehow I don't know how to begin. She glanced at her watch, at the clock. Oh, good gracious, look at the time. Nothing ready and they will be home any minute and probably all in a hurry to go out again. So now in this dialogue we came to know that Mrs. Pearson is very much worried about the time because the time is near when all the family members will come back and she has not ready anything at that particular time because she was talking to Mrs. Fitzgerald. So she is very much afraid of being scolded by her daughter, son and husband also. You can imagine the situation of Mrs. Pearson in her own family. Okay, Mrs. Fitzgerald now is telling, let them wait and look after themselves for once. This is where your foot goes down. Start now. So here Mrs. Fitzgerald is giving suggestions to Mrs. Pearson that it is you who had made them like that only. Okay, so she lighted a cigarette from the one and she had just finished. Mrs. Pearson is telling, Mrs. Fitzgerald, I know you mean well. In fact, I agree with you, but I just can't and it's no use trying to make me. If I promise you, I would really have it out with them. I know I wouldn't be able to keep my promise. So here, Mrs. Pearson is trying to give thanks or trying to promise Mrs. Fitzgerald that she will try her level best to change her family. But she is not able to promise because she knows that she will be weakened, she will be emotion and she will keep on doing whatever they want. She will keep on doing that. So Mrs. Fitzgerald, then let me do it. Mrs. Pearson, oh no, thank you very much, Mrs. Fitzgerald, but that wouldn't do at all. It couldn't possibly be someone else. They would resent it at once and wouldn't listen. And really, I couldn't blame them. I know I ought to do it, but you see how it is. So in this dialogue, we came to know that she is really happy for Mrs. Fitzgerald, such a nice neighbor who wanted to help her. But in this case, Mrs. Pearson is telling that she won't be able to help her because this is different. The matter is totally different. Mrs. Fitzgerald, you haven't got the idea because Mrs. Fitzgerald is a fortune teller and as well as she knows some kind of magic also. So she said that in a cool way, you haven't got the idea. Mrs. Pearson is telling, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you asked me to let you do it. I thought that you asked me to let you do it. Means she's thinking that Mrs. Fitzgerald will do it for Mrs. Pearson in the place of Mrs. Pearson. So Mrs. Pearson is telling, I did, but not as me, as you. So Mrs. Fitzgerald is telling that I will help for you, but not as myself, but as you. So Mrs. Pearson was not able to understand what she is saying, but Mrs. Pearson is saying, but I don't understand, you couldn't be me. She's saying that I don't understand, you couldn't be me. How it is possible that in the place of myself you will tell my husband or tell my daughter or tell my son how to behave? How it be possible? So Mrs. Fitzgerald is telling, we change places or really bodies. You look like me, I look like you. So she's telling that we can exchange our nature, our whole body and everything. We will exchange, and in the place of you, I will tell them how to behave properly. Okay, so isn't it very interesting? Okay, let's know if Mrs. Pearson is ready to accept this proposal, exchanging their personality. Mrs. Pearson is saying, but that's impossible. She's not believing that they can exchange their personality. Mrs. Fitzgerald, how did you know? Ever tried it? How did you know? Did you try? Mrs. Pearson is saying, no, of course not. So Mrs. Fitzgerald is replying in a very coolly manner, I have. Not for some time, but it still ought to work. Won't last long, but long enough for what we learn, what we want to do. Learn it out east, of course, where they are up to these tricks. Then she holds her hand out across the table, keeping the cigarette in her mouth, and say, give me your hands. So she is telling that she is ready to exchange the personality between Mrs. Fitzgerald as well as Mrs. Pearson. So she says, by saying all this, she says, give me your hand. Mrs. Pearson, in a very doubtful manner, well, I don't know, is it right? She is very much frightened after exchanging their personality. So will it be for a short period of time, or will it be forever? She is very much afraid of doing these kinds of challenges. So Mrs. Fitzgerald, it's your only chance. Give me your hands and keep quiet a minute. Just don't think about anything. Then she take her hands. Now look at me. And she said that, look at me. And then they stare at each other, muttering. So what did they say? Astathadam, astathalam, astathalam dam bona. So this were the magic spell. They Mrs. Fitzgerald said. This little scene would be acted very carefully. So the coming scene should be acted very carefully. We are to assume that the personality changed bodies. After the spell has been spoken, both women, still grasping hands, go lags as if the life were out of them. Then both come to life with the personality of the other. Each must try to adopt the voice and mannerism of the other. So now Mrs. Pearson is bold and dominating, and Mrs. Fitzgerald is nervous and fluttery. So after the spell, the magic spell, these two ladies have been changed totally. Now the appearance of Mrs. Fitzgerald, but actually she is Mrs. Pearson. And the appearance of Mrs. Pearson, but actually she is Mrs. Fitzgerald. Remember, my dear children, they have exchanged their characters. Okay. So Mrs. Pearson Mrs. Pearson now with Mrs. Fitzgerald personality. Mrs. Pearson with Mrs. Fitzgerald personality. See what I mean, dear? She noticed the cigarette. Here, you don't want that. Then, because she forgot that she is in another body. Mrs. Pearson is in another body. So she's telling that, see what I mean, dear? Here you don't want that. Snatches it and put it in her own mouth, puffing contentedly. So as you know that Mrs. Fitzgerald is fond of smoking and drinking, and now she is in the body of Mrs. Pearson. Mrs. Pearson never do smoking or drinking, but now Mrs. Pearson is in the place of Mrs. Fitzgerald. So we can see that the attitude of Mrs. Pearson is totally changed. Mrs. Fitzgerald now with Mrs. Pearson personality looks down at herself and sees that her body has changed and gives a scream of fright. So Mrs. Fitzgerald with Mrs. Pearson's personality. Okay. Oh, it's happened, Mrs. Pearson. Of course it happened. Very neat. Didn't know I had it in me, Mrs. Fitzgerald. But whatever shall I do, Mrs. Fitzgerald? George and the children can't see me like this. Mrs. Pearson, they aren't going to. That's the point. They will have to deal with, only they won't know it. Okay, so here still Mrs. Pearson, the actual Mrs. Pearson is afraid whether the husband and her husband and her daughter and son will be not able to adjust her because she is in the form of Mrs. Fitzgerald. So she is much worried now because she has changed. So Mrs. Fitzgerald, but what if we can change back? It would be terrible, Mrs. Pearson. Here study Mrs. Pearson. If you had to leave my life, it wouldn't be so bad. You would have more fun as me than you had as you. So here Mrs. Fitzgerald is saying to Mrs. Pearson that because Mrs. Pearson was very afraid of being in the form of Mrs. Fitzgerald because she is very afraid, and Mrs. Fitzgerald is telling them, enjoy my life. My life is full of happiness, fun. So enjoy your life as me. So Mrs. Fitzgerald here, yes, but I don't want to be anyone else. So she's saying that I don't want to be anybody else. Mrs. Pearson now saying, now stop worrying, it's easier changing back. I can do it anytime we want. So here Mrs. Pearson is telling that no need to worry, I will change it whenever we want it. Mrs. Fitzgerald, well, do it now. So she's telling that please do it now. So Mrs. Pearson, not likely, I've got to deal with your family first. That's the idea, isn't it? Didn't know how to begin with them, you said? Well, I will show you. So here Mrs. Pearson is telling, not actual Mrs. Pearson, but Mrs. Fitzgerald is telling to Mrs. Pearson that she is taking this as a challenge to bring the family of Mrs. Pearson into a trap. So Mrs. Fitzgerald is saying, but what I am going to do? She's asking what I will do. Mrs. Pearson is telling, go into my house for a bit, there's nobody there, then pop up back and see how we are doing. You ought to enjoy it, but get off now before one of them comes. So she's telling that it's better you go to my home, stay there, and in a mid time you come back and see what's going on and how I'm dealing with them. Mrs. Fitzgerald, yes, I suppose that's best. You are sure it will be all right. So with half-heartedly she's saying that everything should be all right. Mrs. Pearson said, it will be wonderful. Now off you go, dear. Then she is asking the actual Mrs. Pearson to go to go back to the house of Mrs. Fitzgerald and stay there and wait for the best result. Now, this is the scene. The next scene, Mrs. Fitzgerald crosses and hurries out through the door right. Left to herself, Mrs. Pearson smokes away, lighting another cigarette, and begins laying out the cards for patients on the table. After a few moments, Doris Pearson comes bursting in left. She is a pretty girl in her early 20s who would be pleasant enough if she had not been spoiled. So she is a very good girl, but she is in her early 20s. She is very pretty in her early 20s, but if she is in a right track, she would be very good. So Doris entered, she says, before she has taken anything in, she says, "Mom, you will have to iron my yellow silk. I must wear it tonight." And she is watching her mother and she says, "What are you doing?" So Mrs. Pearson now uses an ordinary voice, but her manner is not fluttering and apologetic, but cool and incisive. So she's saying, "What do you think I'm doing? Whitewashing the ceiling?" So she's saying, because Doris has asked her mother what you are doing, and Mrs. Pearson, the actual, but in reality she is Mrs. Fitzgerald. Okay, what is the habit of Mrs. Fitzgerald? Smoking and drinking. So Doris here is astonished. "But you are smoking." For the first time she is watching her mother smoking. Okay, Mrs. Pearson, "That's right, dear. No law against it, is there?" She's saying that there is no law against smoking. So Doris, "But I thought you didn't smoke." So as Doris know about her mother that she never smokes, so she says that you never smoke. Mrs. Pearson is replying, "Then you thought wrong." Then she replied that if you had never seen me smoking, then your thought is wrong. So Doris is replying, "Are we having tea in the kitchen?" After coming back from outside, she is asking her mother, "Are we having tea in the kitchen?" Mrs. Pearson's reply, "Have it where you like, dear." So in a very bold manner, she is telling that have it wherever you like, dear. Okay, Doris is now becoming angrily. She says that, "Do you mean it isn't ready?" Because most of the time, the Mrs. Pearson will get ready everything before they come. She will ready the tea, she will ready the snacks, she will ready everything else. Okay, so now Doris is getting angry because Mrs. Pearson has not ready the tea for evening. "Yours isn't. I had all I want. Might go out later and get a square meal at the Clarendon." So she's telling that I had my own tea. If you want a cup of tea, then you prepare yourself. Then she's telling that she will go out for square meal at Clarendon. So Doris is really, she was in a shock because her mother never respond like this, and she is amazed. Who might? Means she is asking who is going out. Mrs. Pearson is replying, "I might. Who would you think?" Then Doris is staring at her mother. "Mom, what's the matter with you?" She's surprised of how the behavior of her mother is totally changed, and she's telling that, "Mom, what's the matter with you?" Mrs. Pearson is telling, "Don't be silly, Doris. It's not me that's being silly, and I must say, it's a bit much when I have been working hard all day and you can't even bother to get my tea ready. Did you hear what I said about my yellow silk? Okay, so Doris is expecting her mother that when she come back from her from outside or from her working place, her mother should get ready the tea, snacks and everything. And she's all repeating the same order for her mother that, did you hear what I said about my silk yellow? On her entrance, she had ordered her mother to iron her yellow silk dress. Mrs. Pearson is replying, no, don't you like it now? I never did. Then Doris, of course I like it. I'm going to wear it tonight, so I wanted it ironed. So for iron the clothes also, Doris at her early 20s, she's just ordering her mother to iron her dress. Okay, she's ordering, not requesting, mom, I will have to go to dinner with so and so, then please iron my dress. She's not requesting. The language she used, how she has used the language, she had not used please also. Okay, so want it ironed? What do you think it's going to do? Iron itself. Then Mrs. Pearson is responding to Doris that she is not bothered if it is ironed or not, and she will not iron her dress. Doris, no, you are going to iron it for me. You always do. So if her mother is always doing, she is expecting that this time also her mother will iron her dress for her. So Mrs. Pearson is telling, well, this time I don't. And don't talk rubbish to me about working hard. I have a good idea how much you do, Doris Pearson. I put in twice the hours you do and get no wages, nor thanks for it. Why are you going to wear your yellow silk? Where are you going? So here in a very hard voice, Mrs. Pearson is replying to her daughter. What she says? That she don't want to iron her dress this time, and she is asking why you want that yellow silk dress and where she is going. Okay, then with that Doris replied, out with Charlie Spence. Okay, she says that out with Charlie Spence. So Mrs. Pearson say, why? So Doris is replying, why? Why? What's the matter with you? Why shouldn't I go with Charlie Spence? If he asks me and I want to, any objection? Go on, you might as well tell me. So now she is getting frustrated of the questions asked by her mother, that why she wanted to go along with Charlie Spence and where she wanted to go. So she is getting irritated. Mrs. Pearson is telling, can't you find anybody better? I wouldn't be seen dead with Charlie Spence, buck-teeth and half-witted. So how she had explained about Charlie Spence, she has described him as buck-teeth and half-witted. So she says that according to Mrs. Pearson, that Charlie Spence is not at all a good boy, not good looking, and not even having good sense or good behavior. So she says that that boy is not good. Indirectly, she is telling that that boy is not good for her. Doris, he isn't. Mrs. Pearson is telling, when I was your age, I have found somebody better than Charlie Spence, or given myself up as a bad job. So she is telling indirectly that the boy is not good at all for her, and she should not go along with him for dinner or for something else, or for date. So Doris, nearly in tears, Oh, shut up. So she is now very frustrated, and she is a little bit hurt by the way her mother has told her that this boy is not at all good for him. Doris runs out. Mrs. Pearson chuckles and begins putting the cart together. After a moment, Cyril Pearson left. He is a masculine counterpart of Doris. So after Doris, then Cyril, the son of Mrs. Pearson, entered in the scene. So Cyril, hello mom, tea ready? Remember, when Doris came inside, she also asked for the tea. And when Cyril also entered in their house, Cyril also asked her mother if the tea is ready. Then Mrs. Pearson replied, no. Cyril, moving to the table, annoyed. Why not? Mrs. Pearson, coolly. I couldn't bother. Feeling off color or something? Mrs. Pearson, never felt better in my life. Cyril, what's the idea then? Mrs. Pearson, just a change. Cyril, well, snap out of it, ma, and get cracking. Haven't too much time. So here, they are not bothering of how the mother is facing, or how the mother is doing all her hard work for them. Okay, so in this way, Mrs. Pearson here is telling that today she is not ready to do anything for them. She wanted a break, a change in her life. Cyril is about to go when Mrs. Pearson's voice checked in. Mrs. Pearson, I have plenty of time. Cyril, yes, but I haven't. Got a busy night tonight. Did you put my things out? So Cyril entered the home. He asked for his tea, and now he is asking his mother whether his mother has put his things out and ready. Mrs. Pearson, can't remember, but I doubt it. And she's saying that I can't remember whether you had told me in the morning, and I doubt whether I had did it or not. So Cyril, now look, when I asked you this morning, you promised. You said you would have to look through them first in the case there was any mending. So you had promised in the morning that you will get ready everything for me. And now you are saying that you are in doubt. Okay, Mrs. Pearson says, yes. Well, now I decided I don't like mending. Yes, morning I promised, but now I decided I don't like mending. So Cyril is saying, that's a nice way to talk. What would happen if we all talk like that? So Cyril is responding in a very frustrated manner. Then he said that this is a nice way to talk, and let all talk like this every day. Mrs. Pearson, you all do talk like that. If there's something at home you don't want to do, you don't do it. If it's something at your work, you get the union to the bar. Now all that's happened is that I have joined the movement. So here she is responding that most of the time you all talk to me like this, and when I talk to you, then it's becoming so weird. So Cyril is responding, I don't get this, mom, what's going on? He is not able to understand why her mother is doing like this. That's all for today's class. Meet you in the next class. We'll continue the second part in the next class.